The 8-round metallic ping echoed across the Hürtgen Forest as Staff Sergeant Robert Hartmann ejected an empty clip from his M1 Garand rifle. It was November 19th, 1944, and the 23-year-old soldier from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, had just fired his last round into the German defensive line approximately 200 meters ahead. Within seconds, enemy fire slackened noticeably. The German soldiers who moments before had been pouring machine gun fire toward American positions suddenly pulled back, their MG-42 guns falling silent. Hartmann's squad leader, Lieutenant James Crawford, noticed the pattern immediately. Every time an M1 Garand's distinctive ping rang out across the battlefield, German soldiers either retreated to covered positions or ceased firing entirely. This wasn't coincidence or cowardice. This was tactical fear born from months of brutal experience facing a weapon that had fundamentally changed the mathematics of infantry combat. The Germans had given this American rifle a nickname that spoke volumes about the terror it inspired: Yankee Gewehr, the Yankee Rifle. But those who had survived encounters with it used darker terms, calling it the Ghost Rifle or the 8-shot Devil. German infantry training manuals from 1944 specifically addressed how to counter soldiers armed with M1 Garands, dedicating entire sections to tactics for neutralizing this single weapon system. No other Allied infantry rifle received such attention in German tactical doctrine. The question wasn't whether German soldiers feared the M1 Garand. The question was, why this particular weapon, among all the rifles, machine guns, and artillery pieces deployed during World War II, earned such singular respect and dread from one of history's most professional and experienced military forces. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The story of why German soldiers feared the M1 Garand begins not on European battlefields, but in the mind of a Canadian-American firearms designer named John Cantius Garand. Born on New Year's Day, 1888, in Saint-Rémy, Quebec, Canada, Garand emigrated to the United States as a child when his family settled in Connecticut. He displayed an early aptitude for mechanical engineering and precision manufacturing, skills that would eventually revolutionize infantry warfare. Garand began working at the Springfield Armory in Springfield, Massachusetts, in 1919, just after the end of World War I. The United States Army had identified a critical weakness in its infantry doctrine during that conflict. American soldiers carried the bolt-action M1903 Springfield rifle, an excellent weapon by the standards of its era, capable of accurate fire out to 600 yards or more. But the bolt-action mechanism imposed a fundamental limitation on the rate of fire. After each shot, the soldier had to manually cycle the bolt, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a new round. This process took time, perhaps 2 to 3 seconds for a well-trained soldier, which translated to a maximum practical rate of fire of approximately 15 aimed shots per minute. In the static trench warfare that characterized World War I, this limitation proved manageable, if not ideal. Soldiers had time to aim carefully between shots, and massed rifle fire from entire companies created sufficient volume. But military theorists recognized that future wars might not be fought from trenches. Mobile warfare, rapid advances, and fluid battlefields would reward soldiers who could deliver accurate fire quickly, without the delay imposed by manual bolt cycling. The concept of a semi-automatic rifle, one that automatically ejected spent cartridges and chambered new rounds using energy from the previous shot, promised to double or triple a soldier's effective rate of fire. Throughout the 1920s and early 1930s, Garand worked obsessively on perfecting a semi-automatic rifle design that could meet the Army's demanding requirements. The weapon needed to fire the standard 30-06 cartridge used in the M1903 Springfield, a powerful round capable of long-range accuracy. It needed to function reliably in mud, sand, extreme cold, and tropical heat. It needed to be simple enough for conscript soldiers to maintain and operate under combat stress. It needed to be durable enough to survive the brutal treatment infantry weapons received in combat. And critically, it needed to be accurate. A rifle that could fire rapidly but couldn't hit targets was worthless. Garand's breakthrough came with his gas-operated rotating bolt design. When a round was fired, a portion of the propellant gases was diverted through a port in the barrel into a gas cylinder beneath the barrel. These gases drove a piston rearward, which in 8 turn rotated and withdrew the bolt, extracting and ejecting the spent cartridge case. A spring then drove the bolt forward, stripping a fresh round from the 8-round en-bloc clip and chambering it, ready to fire. The entire cycle took a fraction of a second. The shooter simply pulled the trigger for each shot. No manual manipulation of a bolt was required. The rotating bolt-locking mechanism provided exceptional strength and reliability, capable of handling the powerful .30-06 cartridge's chamber pressures safely. By 1936, after 17 years of development and countless prototypes, Garand's design had proven itself superior to competing designs from other manufacturers. On January 9, 1936, the United States Army officially adopted the M1 Garand as its standard service rifle, replacing the M1000 903 Springfield. This decision made the United States the first nation in the world to adopt a semi-automatic rifle as standard issue for its entire infantry force. Other nations had experimented with semi-automatic designs, but none had committed to issuing them to every frontline soldier. The German Wehrmacht, widely considered one of the most modern and well-equipped military forces in the world, still issued the Karabiner 98 Kurz, or Kar 98K, a bolt-action rifle derived from designs dating back to the 1890s. The Soviet Red Army issued the M1 Garand, another bolt-action design. The British Army carried the Lee Enfield, perhaps the finest bolt-action rifle ever designed, but still fundamentally limited by its manual operation. Japanese soldiers carried the Arisaka Type 99, also bolt-action. The United States Army, by adopting the M1 Garand, had given its infantry a technological advantage that wouldn't become fully apparent until soldiers began using these rifles in combat. Production of M1 Garands began slowly at Springfield Armory, with manufacturing gradually expanding as the Army worked out production techniques and established quality control procedures. By 1941, as war clouds gathered and American rearmament accelerated, production increased dramatically. Springfield Armory was joined by Winchester Repeating Arms Company, which began manufacturing M1 Garands under contract. Between 1936 and 1945, approximately 4 million M1 Garand rifles were manufactured, enough to equip the entire United States Army and Marine Corps infantry force. The rifle weighed 9.5 pounds unloaded, or 10 pounds with a full 8-round clip, making it heavier than most bolt-action rifles. This weight helped absorb recoil from the powerful .30-06 cartridge, making the weapon more controllable during rapid fire. The M1 Garand measured 43.6 inches in overall length, with a 24-inch barrel that provided excellent accuracy out to 400 yards or more in the hands of a trained marksman. The rifle fed from an 8-round en-bloc clip, a metal frame that held 8 cartridges, and was inserted as a unit into the rifle's receiver from the top. When the last round was fired, the empty clip was automatically ejected upward with that distinctive metallic ping that would become the weapon's signature sound. Soldiers could then immediately insert a fresh clip and resume firing. The en-bloc clip system was both a strength and a weakness. The strength lay in its speed. A soldier could reload an M1 Garand faster than he could reload a bolt-action rifle, especially under stress. The en-bloc clip simply dropped into place, and the bolt automatically chambered the first round. No fumbling with individual cartridges or stripper clips that required manual loading. The weakness was that once a clip was inserted, it couldn't easily be topped off with additional rounds. If a soldier fired 5 rounds and wanted to reload with a full 8-round clip, he first had to eject the partially used clip, wasting 3 rounds, before inserting a fresh one. Experienced soldiers learned techniques to work around this limitation, but it remained an inherent compromise in the design. The M1 Garand semi-automatic operation gave it a maximum effective rate of fire of approximately 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute, nearly triple that of a bolt-action rifle. But raw rate of fire didn't fully explain why German soldiers came to fear this weapon so intensely. The true advantage lay in what military theorists call fire superiority, the ability to deliver overwhelming volumes of accurate fire that suppresses enemy action and maintains initiative in combat. Consider a typical infantry engagement between 2 squads. One German armed with Kar 98K bolt-action rifles, one American armed with M1 Garands. Both squads spot each other simultaneously at a range of 200 yards and take cover. The engagement begins. The German soldiers begin firing their bolt-action rifles. Each man fires, cycles his bolt, reacquires his target through his sights, and fires again. A well-trained German soldier might achieve 15 to 18 aimed shots per minute. The American soldiers begin firing their M1 Garands. Each man fires, and the rifle automatically chambers the next round. His sight picture barely disturbs. He reacquires his target and fires again. A well-trained American soldier might achieve 40 to 45 aimed shots per minute. Within the first 60 seconds, the German squad has delivered perhaps 150 rounds toward American positions. The American squad has delivered perhaps 350 rounds toward German positions. The psychological and tactical impact of this disparity cannot be overstated. German soldiers, taking cover behind trees, rocks, or earthworks, find themselves under sustained, accurate fire. Bullets strike all around them continuously. Wood splinters, rock chips, and dirt spray constantly. The sound is overwhelming, a continuous cracking roar rather than the intermittent bangs of bolt-action fire. Any German soldier who exposes himself to return fire does so, knowing that multiple American rifles can engage him immediately, without the pause for bolt cycling that might allow him to fire and duck back to cover. The natural human response to being under heavy fire is to take cover and stay covered. Soldiers pin their heads down, making it difficult to aim and return effective fire. Even veteran soldiers with iron discipline find their rate of fire degraded when subjected to intense incoming fire. The Americans, meanwhile, face lighter return fire and can expose themselves more freely to engage targets. They maintain fire superiority, controlling the tempo and momentum of the engagement. This dynamic played out thousands of times across every theater where American forces fought during World War II. In the Pacific, on islands like Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and Okinawa, Marine Corps infantrymen, armed with M1 Garands, found themselves fighting Japanese soldiers, armed with the Arisaka Type 38 or Type 99 bolt-action rifles. The Japanese army emphasized spiritual strength, discipline, and willingness to die for the emperor above technological advantages. Japanese infantry tactics often involved nighttime infiltration attacks, banzai charges, and close-quarters combat where Japanese soldiers believed their superior fighting spirit would prevail. The M1 Garand proved devastatingly effective against these tactics. When Japanese soldiers launched banzai charges, rushing forward with bayonets and swords in suicidal human wave attacks designed to overwhelm American positions through sheer fanaticism, They ran into walls of semi-automatic rifle fire. American Marines, firing their M1 Garands as rapidly as they could pull the trigger, could each engage and drop multiple charging enemy soldiers before the wave reached their positions. The size, 8-round capacity, meant Marines could fire continuously without pausing to reload until the clip was exhausted, by which time the charge had often been shattered. After-action reports from Pacific battles consistently noted that Japanese attacks that might have succeeded against troops armed with bolt-action rifles were stopped cold by the volume of fire from M1 Garands. On Guadalcanal in 1942 and 1943, Marines discovered that their M1 Garands gave them a decisive advantage in the jungle warfare that characterized that campaign. The dense vegetation limited visibility and made long-range marksmanship less important than the ability to deliver rapid fire at suddenly appearing targets at close range. When a Marine spotted a Japanese soldier at 50 or 75 yards through the jungle undergrowth, he could engage immediately and fire multiple rapid shots without taking his eyes from the target to cycle a bolt. This capability saved countless American lives in the chaotic, close-range firefights that erupted without warning in the Pacific jungles. Japanese soldiers, armed with bolt-action Arisaka rifles that required manual cycling between shots, found themselves at a lethal disadvantage in these sudden encounters. By the time a Japanese soldier fired his first shot, cycled his bolt, and prepared to fire again, an American Marine might have fired 3 or 4 rounds, significantly increasing the probability of a hit and reducing the Japanese soldier's ability to return effective fire. In North Africa, American soldiers first encountered German Wehrmacht forces during Operation Torch in November 1942 and the subsequent Tunisia campaign in 1943. German soldiers, veterans of years of combat in Poland, France, the Soviet Union, and North Africa, were initially confident in their own capabilities and somewhat dismissive of American combat effectiveness. The Wehrmacht considered itself the world's premier military force, with superior training, tactics, and combat experience. This confidence was shaken during the first major American-German engagement at Kasserine Pass in February 1943. While the Germans tactically defeated the inexperienced American forces in that battle, German after-action reports noted with surprise and concern the volume and accuracy of American rifle fire. German soldiers who survived engagements with American infantry remarked on the continuous nature. The psychological transformation that occurred among German soldiers who repeatedly faced M1 Garand-equipped American infantry became apparent in prisoner interrogations conducted throughout 1944 and 1945. Wehrmacht soldiers captured during the Normandy campaign, the liberation of France, and the final battles in Germany consistently mentioned the American semi-automatic rifle when asked about enemy capabilities they most respected or feared. One particularly revealing interrogation report from September 1944 involved a German Unteroffizier, equivalent to a sergeant, who had fought against American forces since the Normandy landings in June. When asked what surprised him most about American combat effectiveness, he didn't mention tanks, artillery, or air support. He described the moment his squad first engaged American infantry near Saint-Lô and realized that every single American rifleman could fire as rapidly as a German squad's designated marksman with a semi-automatic rifle. The German NCO explained that his training had prepared him for fighting enemies armed with bolt-action rifles, where fire, discipline, and marksmanship could compensate for numerical disadvantages. Against American infantry with M1 Garands, those traditional advantages evaporated. The Americans could maintain suppressive fire while maneuvering, something that required dedicated light machine gun teams in German doctrine. This Wehrmacht sergeant noted that his squad had learned to identify the distinctive 8-round capacity of the M1 Garand and attempted to time their movements during the brief moment when Americans were reloading. But this tactic proved far less effective than hoped, because American soldiers learned to stagger their reloads, ensuring that some rifles remained in action at all times, while others were being replenished with fresh clips. The German tactical adaptation to the M1 Garand threat revealed itself in updated training manuals and field orders issued throughout 1944. These documents instructed German soldiers to increase their use of cover and concealment when facing American infantry, to avoid presenting targets during the critical first seconds of an engagement when American fire superiority would be most decisive, and to rely more heavily on machine guns and automatic weapons to counter the American rifle advantage. Some German units attempted to acquire their own semi-automatic rifles to level the battlefield. The Wehrmacht had developed the Gewehr 43, a semi-automatic rifle that entered service in 1943 and was issued in limited numbers to designated marksmen and elite units. The Gewehr 43 was an excellent weapon, comparable in many respects to the M1 Garand, featuring a 10-round detachable magazine and gas-operated semi-automatic action. But Germany's industrial capacity, strained by years of total war, Allied bombing campaigns, and the enormous material demands of fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously, couldn't produce Gewehr 43 rifles in sufficient quantities to equip more than a small fraction of Wehrmacht infantry. While the United States manufactured approximately 4 million M1 Garands between 1936 and 1945, Germany produced only approximately 400,000 Gewehr 43 rifles during the entire war. This 10-to-1 production disparity meant that the vast majority of German soldiers continued carrying Kar 98K bolt-action rifles throughout the war, facing American opponents who universally carried semi-automatic weapons. The inequality in firepower became a source of bitter complaint among German soldiers. Letters and diaries recovered from German casualties frequently mentioned the American rifle advantage, with a mixture of professional respect and frustrated anger. One German soldier's letter home, written in December 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge, described fighting American infantry in the Hürtgen Forest, and noted that while German soldiers were brave and determined, they couldn't match the sustained firepower that American infantrymen delivered with their semi-automatic rifles. This soldier wrote that fighting Americans felt like fighting an enemy who always had more men than they actually did, because each American rifleman could shoot as fast as 2 or 3 German riflemen. The psychological impact of this firepower imbalance extended beyond tactical considerations into questions of national technological capability and industrial might. German soldiers had been assured throughout the 1930s that Germany possessed superior technology, engineering, and industrial capacity compared to the decadent democracies of America, Britain, and France. German tanks were supposedly better. German aircraft were supposedly more advanced. German weapons were supposedly more effective. Yet here was incontrovertible evidence that America had fielded a standard infantry rifle superior to anything Germany could provide its soldiers, and had done so in such quantities that every American infantryman carried one. This realization contributed to the broader psychological collapse of German military morale during the war's final year. If America could outproduce and out-engineer Germany in something as fundamental as infantry rifles, what did that suggest about the ultimate outcome of the war? The 21st M1 Garand became a symbol of American industrial and technological superiority, a daily reminder carried by every German soldier facing American forces that Germany was fighting enemies with greater resources, superior production capacity, and the ability to equip their entire military with weapons Germany could only dream of issuing universally. The rifle's impact wasn't limited to its tactical effectiveness or psychological influence. The M1 Garand fundamentally changed American infantry doctrine and tactics in ways that rippled through the entire United States military system. American squad tactics evolved to take advantage of the M1 Garand's capabilities, emphasizing aggressive fire and maneuver rather than the more static, deliberate tactics associated with bolt-action rifle-equipped infantry. American infantry squads could advance under covering fire from their own rifles, something previously requiring dedicated support weapons. The M1 Garand's semi-automatic capability also influenced American training methods. Soldiers armed with bolt-action rifles needed extensive marksmanship training because each shot required deliberate aim and rapid reloading demanded practiced manual dexterity with the bolt mechanism. Soldiers armed with M1 Garands still received marksmanship training, but they could also be taught to deliver rapid fire at targets of opportunity, suppressive fire to keep enemy heads down, and quick engagement techniques for close-range combat. The rifle's forgiving nature, automatically chambering each round and requiring only trigger manipulation, made it easier for conscript soldiers with limited training time to achieve basic combat effectiveness. This wasn't to suggest that the M1 Garand made soldiers into instant marksmen, but it did lower the skill floor required for a soldier to contribute meaningful firepower in combat. A mediocre shot with an M1 Garand could put more rounds down range and had more chances to hit his target than an excellent shot with a bolt-action rifle, simply because he could fire more rapidly without the delay and sight picture disruption of manual bolt cycling. American commanders recognized this advantage and exploited it ruthlessly. Infantry tactics emphasized aggressive patrolling, rapid assaults on enemy positions, and maintaining constant pressure that prevented German forces from establishing comfortable defensive positions. The M1 Garand gave American infantry the firepower to execute these aggressive tactics without requiring overwhelming numerical superiority. One of the most significant but least discussed impacts of the M1 Garand involved the changing nature of infantry combat ranges during World War II. In previous wars, infantry engagements often occurred at ranges of 300 to 600 yards, where the long-range accuracy of bolt-action rifles could be fully utilized. Soldiers who could accurately engage targets at these extended ranges held significant advantages. But World War II's infantry combat, particularly in Europe's towns, forests, and hedgerows, and the Pacific's jungles and coral islands, typically occurred at much shorter ranges, often under 200 yards, and frequently under 100 yards. At these shorter ranges, the ability to deliver rapid, accurate fire became more important than the ability to hit targets at 500 yards. The M1 Garand was optimized for exactly this type of combat, providing devastating firepower at the ranges where most actual fighting occurred. German soldiers who survived the war and later wrote memoirs or gave interviews about their combat experiences frequently mentioned specific encounters with American infantry, where the M1 Garand's firepower proved decisive. One former Wehrmacht soldier who fought in the Hürtgen Forest campaign described his company's attempt to counterattack an American position in November 1944. His unit advanced through the forest, expecting to encounter the usual volume of fire from bolt-action rifles that their own fire could suppress or counter. Instead, they walked into what he described as a wall of continuous rifle fire that seemed impossible to come from infantry rifles. His company took severe casualties within the first minute of contact and was forced to withdraw, having accomplished nothing. The German soldier later learned from prisoners that the American unit they'd attacked was a single reinforced platoon, perhaps 40 to 50 men, not the company-sized or larger force he'd assumed based on the volume of fire. Another Wehrmacht veteran who fought in the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 described how German infantry attacks that succeeded against British forces armed with bolt-action Lee-Enfield rifles were stopped cold when the same tactics were used against American forces with M1 Garands. The British Lee-Enfield was arguably the finest bolt-action rifle of World War II, with a 10-round magazine and a smooth bolt action that allowed exceptionally high rates of fire for a manually operated weapon. British soldiers trained extensively in rapid bolt manipulation and could achieve rates of fire approaching 20 to 25 aimed shots per minute. Yet even this impressive performance couldn't match the 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute achievable with an M1 Garand, and German soldiers could feel the difference in the intensity and sustainability of fire they faced. The mythology surrounding the M1 Garand's distinctive on-block clip ejection ping deserves examination, as it reveals how even the weapon's minor characteristics took on psychological dimensions in combat. The metallic ping produced when the empty 8-round clip ejected automatically after the last shot became one of the most recognizable sounds of World War II, featured in countless films, documentaries, and veterans' accounts. A persistent legend claims that German soldiers learned to listen for this distinctive sound during firefights, recognizing it as the signal that an American rifleman had emptied his weapon and was vulnerable during the few seconds required to insert a fresh clip. According to this legend, German soldiers would wait to hear the ping, then rush forward or expose themselves to fire during this brief window of opportunity. The reality was more complex and far less cinematic. In actual combat conditions, with multiple weapons firing simultaneously, artillery explosions, vehicle engines, shouting, and the general chaos of battle, identifying a single specific sound, like the M1 Garand's ejecting clip, was extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible. Combat veterans from both sides consistently stated in post-war interviews that the battlefield environment was far too loud and confusing for such tactics to be practical. Multiple M1 Garands in a squad would be firing at different times, creating overlapping coverage. So even if a soldier somehow heard one ping, indicating an empty rifle, other American rifles would still be actively firing. The few seconds required to reload an M1 Garand weren't significantly longer than the time required to cycle a bolt-action rifle between shots, so waiting for empty weapons didn't provide any tactical advantage. More fundamentally, German soldiers who discussed this supposed tactic in post-war interviews noted that deliberately exposing themselves under fire, even for a few seconds, was suicidal regardless of whether the enemy was momentarily reloading. The smart tactical response to being under fire was to stay in cover, not to gamble your life on the hope that you'd correctly identified a momentary vulnerability. The persistence of the myth reveals something important about the M1 Garand's psychological impact. The weapon was so feared and respected that stories about exploiting even its minor weaknesses took on legendary status, offering German soldiers a small measure of hope that this formidable weapon had vulnerabilities they could exploit. The fact that these supposed vulnerabilities were largely mythical didn't matter. Soldiers needed to believe they had some chance, some tactical counter, some way to fight back effectively against an enemy with superior technology. The emotional and psychological weight carried by soldiers who faced the M1 Garand, and by those who carried it, extended far beyond tactical calculations. For German soldiers, the American rifle represented everything that was going wrong in their war. It symbolized enemy industrial superiority, technological advancement, and resource abundance that Germany couldn't match. Every encounter with M1 Garand-equipped American infantry reinforced the growing realization that Germany was fighting enemies who could outproduce, outgun, and ultimately outlast the Wehrmacht, regardless of German soldiers' courage, skill, or determination. For American soldiers, the M1 Garand represented home, specifically American industrial might and engineering excellence. The rifle was proof that America's factories, engineers, and workers had created something genuinely superior that gave American soldiers advantages in combat. This wasn't propaganda or boasting. This was tangible, measurable superiority that saved American lives and helped win firefights. General George S. Patton's famous description of the M1 Garand as the greatest battle implement ever devised, supposedly stated during the war or shortly after, captured this sentiment perfectly, even if the exact quote's authenticity remains debated among historians. Whether Patton actually spoke those precise words matters less than the fact that the sentiment accurately reflected how American military leadership and infantrymen themselves viewed the weapon. It was, quite simply, the finest infantry rifle of World War II, and everyone who used it knew it. The human cost of the firepower imbalance created by the M1 Garand versus bolt-action rifles can never be precisely calculated, but military historians have attempted estimates based on comparative casualty rates and engagement analyses. Studies examining firefight outcomes where American M1 Garand-equipped units faced German Kar 98K-equipped units of comparable size and experience suggest that the semi-automatic rifle advantage contributed to casualty ratios favoring Americans by margins of 20 to 40% in otherwise similar tactical situations. This means that in engagements where all other factors were roughly equal – training, leadership, terrain, tactical situation – the side with M1 Garands suffered significantly fewer casualties than the side with bolt-action rifles. Extrapolated across hundreds of thousands of infantry engagements throughout the European and Pacific theaters over nearly 4 years of American involvement in World War II, the M1 Garand potentially saved tens of thousands of American lives while inflicting significantly higher casualties on enemy forces. These saved lives represented fathers who came home to their children, sons who reunited with their parents, husbands who returned to their wives, young men who went on to build post-war America, attend college on the GI Bill, start businesses, enter professions, raise families, and contribute to the most prosperous period in American history. The ripple effects of technological superiority in infantry weapons extended across generations. The soldiers who survived World War II because they carried M1 Garands instead of bolt-action rifles went on to father the baby boom generation, build America's post-war economy, lead the civil rights movement, land men on the moon, and create the modern world. Conversely, German soldiers who died in firefights, partly because they faced enemies with superior weapons, represented lost potential for rebuilding Germany after the war. Each casualty was a skilled worker, educated mind, or potential leader who wouldn't participate in Germany's reconstruction. The M1 Garand's tactical advantage contributed to Germany's military defeat, which in turn created the conditions for Germany's eventual democratic transformation and integration into Western Europe. In this indirect but real sense, the rifle that German soldiers feared so intensely during the war helped create the peaceful, prosperous, democratic Germany that emerged in the decades after 1945. John Garand, the weapons designer, lived to see his creation become legendary. He continued working at Springfield Armory until his retirement in 1953, contributing to various weapons development projects, but never achieving another design success comparable to the M1 rifle. Garand received numerous honors and awards for his contribution to American military capability, though he never became wealthy from his invention. As a government employee, Garand didn't receive patent royalties on the millions of rifles manufactured using his design, a fact that later generations found unjust, but which Garand himself apparently accepted with equanimity. He died on February 16, 1974, at the age of 86, having witnessed his rifle serve in World War II, the Korean War, and the early years of the Vietnam War, before finally being replaced by the M14 and later the M16. The M1 Garand remained in frontline American service until the early 1960s, an extraordinary service life spanning nearly 3 decades. Even after being replaced as the standard service rifle, M1 Garands continued serving in National Guard units, military ceremonies, and training roles for years afterward. Today, original M1 Garands are prized by collectors and military historians as tangible connections to the generation that fought World War II. The rifles are still fired by competitive shooters in vintage military rifle competitions, where they continue demonstrating the accuracy and reliability that made them feared by enemies and beloved by the soldiers who carried them. Museums dedicated to World War II prominently display M1 Garands, alongside the stories of the men who used them, ensuring that future generations understand not just what the weapon looked like, but what it meant to the soldiers who depended on it for their survival. The deeper lesson of the M1 Garand story extends beyond military technology into questions of innovation, preparation, and the importance of maintaining technological superiority. The United States adopted the M1 Garand in 1936, 5 years before entering World War II. This decision reflected foresight by military planners who recognized that future wars would reward nations with superior infantry weapons, even though the precise nature of those future wars remained unclear. By the time American soldiers entered combat in 1942, they carried weapons that had been tested, refined, and mass-produced for 2 years, giving them immediate advantages over enemies who hadn't made similar investments in infantry weapons modernization. Germany's failure to develop and field semi-automatic rifles in comparable numbers reflected broader weaknesses in German strategic planning and industrial capacity. The Wehrmacht invested enormous resources in tanks, aircraft, submarines, and other prestigious weapons systems, while neglecting the basic infantry rifle, the weapon every soldier carried and used most frequently in combat. This proved a costly error that German soldiers paid for with their lives and their ultimate defeat. The men who faced M1 Garands in combat, whether they wore German, Japanese, or other enemy uniforms, weren't monsters or fanatics in most cases. They were soldiers serving their nations, fighting for causes they believed in or were conscripted to defend, trying to survive battles and return home to their families. The fact that they feared the M1 Garand didn't make them cowards. It made them realists who understood they faced enemies with superior technology that they had no answer for. Their fear was rational, born from painful experience in combat, where the rifle's capabilities proved decisive again and again. Some of these soldiers survived the war and went on to rebuild their nations, raise families, and contribute to the post-war world. Others died in firefights where the American advantage in firepower proved insurmountable. All of them knew what it felt like to face an enemy whose every rifleman could fire as rapidly as their own squad's machine gunner, to hear the continuous cracking of semi-automatic rifle fire that never seemed to pause, to understand that the enemy had technological advantages that training and courage couldn't overcome. The M1 Garand's legacy persists not just in military museums and history books, but in the fundamental understanding that technological superiority in warfare can be decisive. The rifle proved that innovation matters, that foresight in weapons development can save lives and win wars, and that the nation which equips its soldiers with superior tools provides them advantages that multiply their effectiveness in combat. These lessons remain relevant in the 21st century as new technologies continue transforming warfare in ways that would have seemed impossible to John Garand when he began designing his rifle in 1919. The soldiers who carried M1 Garands into battle, and the enemies who faced them, are now nearly all gone, their numbers diminishing with each passing year. But their stories remain, preserved in unit histories, after-action reports, personal memoirs, and oral histories. These accounts consistently emphasize how the rifle gave American soldiers confidence in combat, knowing they possessed advantages over their enemies that helped even the odds in desperate situations. That confidence translated into lives saved and battles won, ultimately contributing to victory in history's deadliest conflict. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, Check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.